Now what will it be? Death or exile?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Film Exiles podcast, a special edition. This edition concerns TV, streaming, content, entertainment media in general, and an overview looking at the past, the present, and the future of what the industry is going to be like. I remember a couple of years ago seeing my sister rent these red-sleeved DVDs and them coming in the mail all the time, and it was called Netflix. And I just thought it was very, very weird. At that time, I still used to go to Blockbuster, and I used to enjoy walking through the stacks, picking out a new movie, and going back home and watching it with some pizza and a Coca-Cola. Little did I know that those were the last days of the Blockbuster experience, and Netflix suddenly took over the world. We're living in an interesting time where things are changing rapidly, where there are a lot of discussions going on about what the future is going to look like for the entertainment that we consume. And so today I have with me my fellow film exiles to dive deep into this discussion. With me, I have Chris. Chris, introduce yourself to the people.
Hello everybody, I hope to bring my perspective from the British point of view. We will all have different experiences here, and hopefully I can cover that kind of European perspective.
Very nice. And next we have Mike. Mike, introduce yourself.
Hello, it's me, Millennial Mike. You may have heard me around, and here I am again to spread the joy.
The joy, really? Nobody believes you. You're not spreading joy.
Hey, I'm the most positive exile, right?
Yeah.
I pride myself on that, you know. I just say the least.
All right. and we also have with us Breezy. Fab, introduce yourself to people.
Hi guys, I'm Fabrice. You've heard me on I think one episode of the Running Council and a few episodes of the Film Exile podcast, and I'll be coming in from a Cameroonian and Canadian perspective.
Very nice. A lot of international flavor here. I am Lupe. I'll be bringing an American flavor similar to Mike, but I'm a little bit older than Mike, so there's probably a bit more, past historic context to bring to the discussion. So part one of this discussion, let's start with a look back on what entertainment and media has been like, sort of like a past and prehistoric, look at where we're coming from. So, Mike, would you like to tell us what did entertainment look like in the past?
Sure. Well, I mean, like for me personally, I guess before that, I mean, if we're gonna, kind of go grand here and big picture, I mean, we're looking at, a lot of live theater and, more plays and those sort of theatrics, before we got into the age of technology where we were recording it and distributing it and things like that. Then you fast forward and then you got, more cinema, black and white. Mm-hmm. Then you're gonna go to TV once TVs hit the average home, and then, mm-hmm. Zoom way forward, and you got 70s, 80s blockbusters. That's when things kind of split, and you have a definitive difference between the tent pole kind of prestige cinematic experience, and then the more convenient at home, laid back and relaxed TV experience. And that's kind of escalated all the way until this day. So that's a pretty broad, Of course, my experience was different. I mean, when I grew up, I was watching a lot of cartoons, mm-hmm. and I was playing a lot of video games. A lot of Super Nintendo, SNES, PlayStation 1, that was a big part of it. Toonami. I was always kind of gravitating toward that sort of content.
Yeah, I mean, for me, not too dissimilar to your answer. When we look at the past of entertainment in households, I mean, we go from a place where, if we're thinking of people like on the frontier, people experience more live entertainment, and people had to like go out. You didn't have like cable in your house and stuff like that. And then TVs got in houses, and in the future, even video games is something that I was into like when I was a child. But we had limited content. So basically, growing up, you had TV, you had video games, you had your VHS or your DVD, and if you wanted more, you'd go rent something at the rental store. So I think one of the most important things to remember is that in the past we were limited on our options, and it kind of seemed like the providers of the content were the people who controlled everything. So you only basically got on TV, you got to watch what they were showing on TV, and that was it, and in terms of even DVDs or VHSs, you don't have an unlimited library. Your library depends on how much money you have. So that's sort of like a past view of where we were in terms of entertainment. But how has the user experience changed? I'd like to get a word or two from Breezy and Chris. How has the user experience changed?
Okay, so I'll take it first. Basically, in the olden days, I'm a bit older.
In the olden days,
I grew up with 4 television channels in the UK. We had 2 provided by the BBC, which is a state-owned broadcaster, and 2 independent channels, which were funded through advertising. And how did I get my content? So basically, we owned a VHS player, and actually before that, we owned a Betamax player.
Wow.
So yeah, I had one of those things. I had 1 film or 2 films on it. One of them was Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. So that's what I had on Betamax back then. I had VHSs, but they were like things that we would record off the television. So if, for example, one of them was Return of the Jedi, and we recorded that thing, and we had to be there at a certain time when the channel was showing it, press record, press pause at every commercial break, and then if we were lucky enough, we had 1 good copy of Return of the Jedi. And I had my own personal library to look through, and that was my early childhood experience. Growing up a bit older, every Friday, my mum used to take me to Blockbuster Video. We'd spend an hour in there looking through the videotapes. I was allowed always to take 3 films home for the weekend, and then once you watch them, you have to rewind them things and
so you don't get fined.
So you don't get fined, and take them back by the following weekend and pick up your next stash. So that was basically my experience, and how it's changed now is I literally turn on the computer and press play.
Yeah.
So it's taken a whole communal experience. So my father used to help me record. My mother used to take me to Blockbuster. Now it's basically it's taken a kind of relationship, part of our relationship away. That's what I would say is the biggest change in terms of how it's affected me. How about you, Fab?
My childhood was a little different when it comes to TV and entertainment, because growing up, I remember there was a time we had 2 channels. One of them was in Spanish, and the other was in French. So basically, I grew up.
If you weren't bilingual, basically you had one channel.
No. That's the thing. No one was bilingual. There are no Spanish.
All right.
Spanish isn't a language that was spoken in Cameroon. So basically, I grew up watching.
Wow.
So you basically had one channel.
Yeah, I'll say 2, because I spend much of my time watching I was watching Pokemon in Spanish.
What were you watching on the Spanish channel?
I watched a lot of the Leprechaun in Spanish.
The Spanish soap operas, you know?
Yeah, a lot. Like, it was a channel from Guinea, I think. Yeah, it was from Equatorial Guinea, because it's really close to Cameroon, so we had access to that channel. But unless you were wealthy enough to get like the French and the European networks, you were basically relegated to those 2. And the TV schedules were really strict. Like, we had TV from 7 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then everything would get cut off, and then it would come back at around 4 p.m. That's when the kids got back from school, people came back from work. So the TV would come back on, and we had like sitcoms like the Fresh Prince, the Cosby Show, and a lot of American programming.
Okay.
And as I grew up, we started getting. There was a channel called Manga. It was basically all Japanese animation.
Okay.
I was basically addicted to that.
I can only wish I had anime channel back in the day. Toonami was as close as it got,
Mike is a huge anime fan. So
it was
Breezy.
Yeah.
Breezy, let me ask you. So apart from television, what else did you have access to?
I had a Super Nintendo.
Okay, so video games.
Yeah, that was a lot of.
What about theater?
See, we had what
when
we
you were
call
10?
We have what we call video clubs. We didn't have movie theaters per se.
Okay.
It's basically you go into a room, and the guy you pay to get in, he'll pop in a VHS of whatever movie was on schedule for that day, or
I think they still have that in Amsterdam.
Yeah. So
yeah, by the Amsterdam. Yeah. But that's very interesting, because this goes on to our next point, which I would like Chris and Mike to discuss about. In terms of the power dynamics, one thing that I have noticed in terms of our entire conversation is the lack of choice, the lack of power of us as users. I'm hearing everybody saying, we had to do this. We had to work it around these constraints. So can you guys speak a little bit more to the power dynamics in terms of who the supplier of the content was, who the consumer was, and what that relationship was? Who do you guys think had the power, and who benefited the most?
Well, I think that at the end of the day, I think that the companies always benefit the most, regardless. They benefit the most now. They benefited the most then. I don't think there's ever been a time where they haven't benefited the most. They've always found a way to exploit the system. Mm-hmm. But I think that now we're able to, it's more mutual benefit now, with how readily available the content is, how much options we have, and the devices that we can view them from, et cetera, et cetera. Back then, trying to watch any sort of episodic show, a show with a narrative that kind of continued through each episode, was a lot more difficult to do, because if you didn't get an episode, then you were basically missing a piece.
You're screwed. You're done.
So you could watch it anyway and hope you catch it later on, or you could just just watch all the episodes and then in your head try to remember, try to imagine how everything comes together. that a lot. So.
All right, Chris, could you speak some more to that?
In the UK, we have the BBC, which is a publicly owned channel. Broadcaster. They've got radio stations and television. And basically, just for people outside of the UK, every household that owns a television pays an annual license fee.
Which is a tax?
Yeah, it's basically a tax. It's currently somewhere around 120 £120, which is around $160-70 a year. And what the benefits we get for that is access to those channels, and those channels do not have advertising at all. So if you had an hour show or a film play on that channel, it would be uninterrupted with no breaks. So the power would be basically in the hands of the consumer in that situation, because we owned the station and we had the opportunity to say, if we did not like, basically they had a responsibility to serve, and they still do, to serve the population. So if there's programming that is non-economically viable or things that people do not want to watch, they have to make those changes. They also have to answer to us as license fee payers with respect to what they pay their stars. So they have to publish what they pay for their main hosts for sports programs and the like. The other two channels, or the other channels now, they're all basically what you would be used to in the States or internationally. They're owned by moguls, likes of Rupert Murdoch, for example, and they basically decide what you will see. But again, it's up to you to whether you want to watch that or not. So that's
I mean, those are interesting takes, because I have an opposing view to both of your conclusions. Both of you feel that consumers either had power or it was kind of equal. I feel like in the past, a lot of the power was in the hands of the suppliers in terms of access to content, in terms of, for example, like, what Mike said, in terms of whatever's shown on TV, that's what you get. You don't just, you don't have a lot of choices, for how to consume it, when you consume it, and what you consume.
They were the technical limitations of the time.
So exactly.
They were constrained. The provider was as constrained as the consumer was.
Not necessarily, because they ended up having the power to put whatever they wanted out there. What they curated the goods. I mean, but that's my perspective on it. Now let's move on to part 2 of our discussion. Is the present, or what you call the modern era. So let's talk about what entertainment in households and for consumers looks like now. So this era is defined by the internet. Telecommunications has changed our entire world. Breezy and Mike, can you guys talk about what the internet has done to change things from the past era to the modern era? How are things different today in terms of internet? Binging. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and go first. I mean, with the internet, basically, you have the ability to choose what order you watch it and how much you watch and when and where you watch it. Most of the time, if you don't have anything to do, you're just gonna, and the show is good, you're obviously gonna watch as much as you can at whatever time until you fall asleep, or you pass out. So because of that, I think that since the internet has allowed for that, it also changes the way that the content's actually made itself. I mean, if you make something with the consumer completely in mind, and they're going to watch the entire show in one sitting, you don't have to necessarily consider, you don't have to resell the show to them every episode. You don't have to keep them on the edge of their seat. You don't have to get them to try to come back because they're going to watch the entire thing. you can kind of make the entire show from like a big picture perspective, and you can be like, okay, this is how they're gonna feel. It's almost like watching a movie at home, basically. You know?
Yeah. I was about to say that. That's why we now experience the phenomenon of people saying, it's an 8-hour movie, it's a 10-hour movie. That's a very smart point.
Or even experience, I would even say, because some episodes are less important than others, but it's all kind of just part of the experience.
All right, Breezy, do you have anything to add to that?
For me, I think it's all about access, because you guys mentioned before, growing up, you had to move, you had to go somewhere else to get your source of entertainment, be it from a Blockbuster or whatever. From here, you can stay in your bed all day and get entertainment from all the way across the world. It doesn't matter what it is, be it sports, TV, movies, reality TV, and the internet created a lot of competition. With the rise of, I think Chris mentioned it, something like YouTube that's free. You have people creating content that they don't need permission from an overseer. They don't have to pay someone. They can just grab a camera and create from the comfort of their own home.
Very true.
And that has drastically changed the way we take in our entertainment.
Very true. I think you guys, shed light on a couple of things that I hadn't even seen from that perspective. The internet has really changed the type of content that we consume. The user experience is completely different. As you guys said, now we're viewing things on our mobile devices, on tablets. I can be at the gym running on the treadmill watching my favorite show, any episode of my favorite show, and that's not something that we experienced before. Go ahead, Breezy.
No, I was just gonna say, like, me, for example, I can't remember the last time I actually watched a show from my TV. Like,
wow,
I've been watching it from either my laptop or my cell phone for the past, I would say, at least 7 months.
That's interesting, because that also will factor into the way that content creators, and when I say content creators, I mean filmmakers, TV show producers, and even people who make things on YouTube or on Instagram or whatever, that's going to factor into the way that they create those things. So, for example, how much are they going to invest into cinematography? What is the picture going to look like? Are they trying to give you a quote-unquote cinematic experience, or are they trying to give you a home theater experience or a cell phone experience? So these are interesting things that are going to affect the way we consume things and the way the things we consume look, and how they're going to change from the past to the future. Chris and Breezy, could you guys talk a little bit more about the rise of Netflix and the death of Blockbuster? Because this is a huge thing, and it's sort of like the turning point in the discussion. Could you guys talk a bit about that?
Go ahead, Fab.
Chris. Oh, you want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so as we all know, like, I think everyone knows about the story about the CEO of Netflix going to Blockbuster and asking for them to partner up.
Yeah, this is a crazy thing.
And he was basically laughed out of the room. And a few years later, Blockbuster was going under, and Blockbuster was valued at about $5 billion at the time. And just a few years later, they were going under because apparently their system was based upon charging their consumers for late fees. That's how they made most of the money.
That's one thing that I remember about Blockbuster. I hated those late fees.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently, that's where most of the revenue was coming from. And Netflix, on the other hand, it was a subscription-based service, so there were no late fees. You brought the movie back whenever you wanted. So over time, they started taking customers from Blockbuster little by little, and before Blockbuster knew it, there was a big man in town, and it wasn't Blockbuster anymore.
It wasn't.
Yeah, it's funny how things work out. Go ahead, Chris.
So for me, the experience is I went from being a Blockbuster guy, like I mentioned earlier. It was a kind of ritual thing, and I kind of skipped over the whole DVD subscription.
I skipped over
thing.
that too,
and I
never could get into that.
Yeah, it never not that it didn't appeal to me, it just didn't exist as part of my life. It might have been the time that it happened, like I was in my teens. I was always playing outside. I was more listening to music rather than
Chris,
video games. Yeah,
Chris, I have a question for you. Was that service available in England? Because it was never available here in Canada.
I believe it was. I never subscribed to it, but I do believe it was.
Okay.
I did hear stories of people like who've still got their Netflix DVDs because they never asked for them back. Yeah,
that was the beauty of Netflix, man.
Yeah, so but I kind of skipped over all of that and went straight into cable. We have two main subscribers. So we have Sky in the UK, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and the competitor is Virgin Media, which is owned by Richard Branson. And relatively early on, they had a lot of opportunities for reruns. They had Sky Movie Channel, which kind of showed a particular film that you wanted to watch multiple times, so you were less constrained. Like, so if you wanted to watch Jurassic Park and you missed it on a Thursday, you'd probably catch it on the Friday as well, or on the Saturday. So that was kind of morphing into the more option kind of based thing that we have now. That was kind of the transition period that I experienced rather than going into DVDs. I never was a big DVD collector or renter. It went straight from VHS basically to online non-physical content. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, I said the rise of Netflix is such an inflection point, and it's interesting because their DVD phase was quite short-lived, because they, as a company, you have to give them a lot of credit because they are masters at foresight. I bet they have like Nostradamus somewhere in the back, predicting. They're very mobile, very agile, very forward-thinking company. And they saw that streaming was the way forward. Like, once they put a couple of a DVD library on the internet, and they saw that people liked that, they saw that that was going to be the future. And so they invested in original content. I think their first big hit was House of Cards.
Yeah.
That was not the first show, but it was their first big hit. It's won like a ton of Emmys.
That was them saying we arrived.
It had like, big directors, had big stars in it, and from there it changed everything. It cost $100 million to make that show, and they got their money back. Breezy, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted a quick correction, because you said previously that their DVD stint was short-lived. Actually, I don't think it was.
About how many years was it?
Because they started in 1998. That's when they started their DVD rental, and the streaming service didn't start until 2007.
Wow.
That's longer than I
wow. I thought it was from
3 or 4 years.
I thought it was
Same. I was reading this article from BBC that was mentioned. It was talking about how Netflix, how they started and how they transitioned, and yeah, just like you guys, I was shocked to know that they were around for that long doing the
good.
DVD.
Thanks for the correction.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't even. 98. Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It was. Go ahead, Chris.
I said, was Mike born then?
Sure.
Real funny.
All right. So I'd like Mike and I to contribute to the discussion and talk about what's going on television-wise, what's going on in gaming, what's going on in content like, YouTube or Instagram, videos or whatever.
Facebook.
Like what's going on right now. So let me start. Right now, cable television is waning. We're getting a lot more people cord cutting. People are getting more concerned with the cable bill. The cable bill got bloated. Like people have been complaining about cable bills for years. If you want access to even premium content like HBO, it escalates your cable bill, and so TV is suffering. Obviously, Netflix is the king right now. Netflix has almost a monopoly on streaming, but then we're seeing some new entrants into the market. So obviously, we have Amazon, who are investing heavily and doing quite a good job. We have Hulu. Hulu are also, experiencing some success. YouTube also has been dabbling with their YouTube Red. There's Karate Kid. There's Cobra Kai. There's an amazing show called Impulse.
I really like that
there.
show. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that they've been experiencing some growing pains.
I think you can buy or rent films from YouTube as well.
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
you can. Yeah.
The thing about YouTube, I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about. Maybe we could talk about it like as a subject later, but YouTube is so interesting because YouTube started off. They're the only ones who start off as a user generated format, and then kind of transitioned into your more premium so. But also with all of the interesting, with the way that they advertise and then being purchased by Google, several years back, and all the things that happened with that, right? And then also the way that, user content is monetized. And then now we're in a situation where user content has to live in the same place with premium content, as if the competition wasn't a problem before, and users are suffering, on YouTube. Yeah. They're suffering. It's hard to get your work out there. It's hard to monetize. It's difficult because you have people fighting over each other's content. It's difficult. So it's going to be really interesting to see YouTube how they go forward, with this,
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Something also for us to consider is I've seen an evolution in video games, and video games are becoming a lot more cinematic, and we're doing a lot better quality storytelling that's rivaling the cinematic experience, the cinematic storytelling experience, the television storytelling experience. So that's something that's also become a big player in terms of the content that we consume and how we tell stories.
That's an interesting thing to talk about, because I think that with so when you think about the gamer, who is the gamer? Well, most people would say it's like the children, the young, maybe like teens, preteens, right? But no, actually the gamer is going to be your older teens, going to be they're going to be the ones who will be able to afford it. Who can spend the money on the console, spend the money on the games, spend the money on the internet, online subscriptions, things like that. So, and go ahead.
No, that's very interesting because that kind of dovetails into our next topic, and I'd like you to continue on that note. So let's talk about the future and what things are going to look like. So let's talk about who the consumer is going to look like, people who consume media. And that's exactly what you're talking about right now in terms of younger people, but people who, for video game content, people who have the financial access to purchase the hardware and even the software updates for that. So can a couple of you guys just talk about prognosticating, looking into the future, all right? Look into the structural changes that are going to come. Who is the consumer of content primarily going to be? Because in the past, it was, mainly like, our parents. A lot of the control had to do with like our parents and older people. It just felt like there was that sort of older demographic that was controlling what we consume. So what's it going to look like? Is it going to be the same? Is it going to change?
So if I can just chime in here, like we are living in a very crazy time at the minute. So we have old people who never grew up with the technology that a lot of us growing up with, and they're still very much dependent on their television, their traditional forms of consuming media, their televisions, their radio stations. Now obviously you're going to have older people who are going to be able to learn about computers and new modern technology, but we are still seeing that like my parents, for example, they still watch television. They don't really use the internet much for other than reading the news, for example. They won't sit and find a streaming service and consume their content that way. But I look now at people who are younger than us, and it's, they never watch television. So they do have to have that financial ability to buy their cell phones, buy their computers, and obviously this is going to cause an issue with like social balance. So if you have people who are well off, they're going to still face the issues that Fab brought up earlier. So Fab was talking about if you are wealthy in Cameroon, you could access more television channels. Same in the UK. If you are wealthy in the early 90s, you could access Sky Sports, Sky Movies, which were not available terrestrially. We're going to have similar issues, I believe, in the future. So people who do have the ability to buy games consoles, buy cell phones, buy computers, are going to have access to this content, and the people that don't, they won't be able to. So I think that is something to look at as well. But I do think prices will come down eventually.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because I look at it from the complete opposite end. Like, media in the future, in my opinion, is going to be so accessible to everybody else. Because let's think about it, from when we grew up to where we are now, like almost everyone now has a cell phone.
Very true.
Growing up, even like home phones, not everybody could afford it. And as we keep going forward into the future, like, I think technology gets more accessible to everybody else. So I think media is gonna be it's gonna keep growing rather than
also, we're just living in a kind of peculiar time at the minute, and we will transition there, Fab. I completely agree.
I think in regards to demographics, there's another really interesting factor, is that right now with TV is kind of a solo experience, right? And if you're watching TV traditionally, or I guess the way we're doing it now with streaming services and whatnot, then you're probably also pretty up-to-date with technology. So you're probably also on Twitter, on Facebook, you're talking about it. So you're experiencing it through those means with other people, if at all. Right. So right now, basically, theatrical experiences are going to be your family event type thing. So you're bringing the entire family. it's something that, you know, is kind of, you know, for everybody, right? But then, you know, your more individual experiences are going to be your TV series. Now, as movies start to become more available, you know, over streaming providers and on your phones and your tablets and things like that. And I think just in general, as people become more and more antisocial, I think we're going to start to experience most of these things on our own. And that's going to be interesting. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen in that event because
that's a brilliant
you're
point, Mike.
Completely right. Because when I was growing up, we had one television, and we all watched it. There was 4 people in my household, and we all watched it. Now every house has got a television or a computer. Every room in the house has got a television or a computer, and everyone's watching whatever they want to watch.
Exactly. Also, TV served for many years as a way to instill, as a way for the parents to allow, you know, it allowed parents to instill family values because parents would moderate the entertainment experience, you know. So it allowed opportunities for the adults to take charge in moderating the values that the family would get to partake in, right? But now with everything so separate, the only one who's moderating those values is the content itself as well as social media. That and then of course just media in general that interpret, you know, what values are important and what values aren't. So that's going to be a big factor as well going forward.
Yeah. That's a brilliant point. The only thing I'll add to this conversation is that, so in terms of demographics, you know, Fab was talking about how, you know, they had like only, you know, like one channel, and, you know, they didn't get some programs that were available in some other places. Now, people who create content, you know, whether it's Hollywood, are creating for the entire world.
Yeah.
There are basically no regional, you know, limitations apart from, you know, because they limit some things in China, and that has to do with politics. But in terms of reach, theoretically, if you create something in Hollywood, it could be streamed in Japan. And as a matter of fact, Netflix have some specialty shows that are only created for regional markets. You know, their Japanese language and their Japanese culture. And this is something that we never experienced before. So
I do find that to be interesting because, you know, in the news, there's been a lot of interesting elements about the theater, like what's happening to the theaters right now, right? And a lot of the theaters, the big ones, are being purchased by China. Like AMC was the biggest one. It's not actually AMC, it was a company that owns AMC, and China purchased that along with everything underneath it. So, you know, I find it to be interesting, you know, that China is putting so much money into the theatrical experience, especially here in America, when it seems that, you know, the American audience and just the audience in general at large is kind of abandoning the theater. So you know, is that a waste of money? Is it a waste of time? What's going to become of that huge investment in the, you know, the United States blockbuster, you know, theatric, you know, cinemas?
So that's a perfect segue into our next topic, and it's, in the future, what is content going to look like? What sort of content is going to dominate our attention, and what's the quality going to be like? What's going to be the capital investment? Are companies going to be spending a lot? Are they going to be spending less? So I would like Chris and Fabrice to talk about this, and you can piggyback off what Mike said in terms of where the theater, the cinema industry is, and what struggles they're going through as well.
So basically, the lines are being blurred right now, right? So when you're looking at the quality of this kind of content that is coming out from the likes of Netflix and Amazon and whatnot, and the quality even between the two, that line is being blurred more than ever before. So before it was, you had your TV star, you had your TV actors, and you had your movie stars, and that transition was impossible. Like, I think George Clooney was it was a huge one. Yeah.
I think George Clooney and Jennifer Aniston are the only two that I can remember
Yeah.
that made that leap in a big way.
So now everything's more, or going forward, I think everything will be more fluid. You're going to have actors acting on the streaming service content, and in the theatrical kind of content. We're looking at quality as well, what the cinematography is like. So back when we were younger, televisions were 14 inches diagonally.
Yeah.
They were quite small. So when thinking about things cinematographically, you would have a lot of close-up shots on people's faces for television programs.
Mm-hmm.
Why? So you could actually see from your distance of 10 feet from your 10-inch television what was going on the actor's face.
Mm-hmm.
So what television looked like was very different to what theaters would look like, because you don't necessarily want to see a 1,000 inch
a 1,000 inch ugly face of someone like, I don't know, Michael Shannon.
Right. So things looked very much different.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell just by looking at it if something was a television program or not. Televisions are getting bigger and better and higher quality,
and they're getting cheaper as well.
Right. So you don't need
sound systems, the whole experience.
All of that. So you don't need to film a television program in the way that you used to have to with these close-up shots of people's faces. Mm-hmm. Now, looking into the future, we're looking at other kinds of technology where we consume our content, like a cell phone. Cell phones are small. So do we need to wind back to that kind of method? Mm-hmm. That's a question for cinematographers and directors. I don't know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a lot to do with the value, that people place on that kind of material. I mean, like, do people care about it? Like, do they want the large scope cinematography and the kind of the weight and the breadth of it, or if they're, I mean, how many times, like for instance, Fab was mentioning earlier, he's hardly watching on his TV. I mean, how many people have a home theater, but they can, but I mean, are they watching the same kind of content?
I think like just to interject, I won't take long. I watch most of my stuff on my TV. I mean, I invested in a TV that's a little bit expensive, and I prefer to. So I don't think that distinction is going to be important.
Well, you're in exile.
No, but honestly, I don't think to companies, I don't think that they're really gonna care.
Yeah,
I think that they're gonna see it all as the same.
Okay. Like I was gonna add on to what Chris was talking about our company is gonna have to change the way they film stuff to fit in for the smaller cell phones or whatever. But you're looking at it from the perspective of right now. Because remember, before, cell phones were trying to get as small as possible.
Yeah.
Then we got to a point where now they're trying to get bigger and bigger as time goes by. So in the future, who knows what we're going to be using? Maybe cell phones are going to be obsolete.
You're absolutely right.
Need them anymore.
I've even seen some cell phones that have inbuilt projectors on them as well.
I was going to talk about exactly that, man. It seems like you were reading my mind on that one.
Great minds.
Yeah, they sure do. Like, that's what I was going to say. Like, are we going to be using projectors in the future? Are we going to even need cell phones at all? Or TV screens, for that matter? Like, who knows?
In terms of the quality, do you think that we're going to get a more homogenized kind of method of filming? So we're going to just
I think so, because this is the thing is, like, consider like software, right? With like open operating systems like Android or Windows. You have to scale, and whenever you have to scale, you have to think lowest common denominator. You can't custom tailor, anymore. since there's no distinction, then there's no, there's no standard really. You have to lower the standard.
To piggyback off that, Mike, that's exactly what's happening with Netflix. Now, if you follow some of my discussions on Twitter, I'm trying to draw attention to a fact that people haven't yet noticed. I think people may catch on, or maybe not. I may be left alone. And it's that the quality visually, in terms of cinematography especially, of content that Netflix puts out is not as good as HBO or Hulu or Amazon Prime. Now I know that's a weird thing to hear, especially because even Roma won an award for its cinematography, but that's a special case because it was shot in black and white and it was playing with light in a different way. But the reason why is exactly what you said. Because of the software and because of streaming, they have found a way to reduce their the bandwidth that's going to be used to an acceptable level, so you don't have buffering issues, and so that there's sort of like, as you said, lowest common denominator, homogenized across the board. And if you watch a lot of Netflix content, which I have been, and sort of like paying attention to it, it tends to look alike, and it's becoming the new television quality.
Yeah, I think if there's a standard that Netflix imposes, or like maybe some guidelines they impose, it makes sense, because I totally agree with you. I'm seeing that Netflix TV shows have a similar texture to them, a similar rhythm, a similar pattern, that it's something you pick up on subtly. And
I've done a little bit of research in it, and they have a strict list of cameras that you can use, and a strict list of digital intermediate software that you can use to color correct. And that's something
very interesting.
Okay, that's interesting, because I didn't know about that at all.
Yeah.
So we're talking about how Netflix is the respite for creators, and then you have a strict list of tools you can use. That flies directly in the face of that.
It's a huge concern to me. For example, we have filmmakers who are known for shooting exclusively on film, on photochemical film, and with their creations on Netflix, they're forced to shoot digitally. So yeah, those are one of the concerns and one of the things that we need to think about when we're thinking about how we're going to
and that's another reason why I think that Spielberg was concerned about letting films on Netflix be applicable for the Oscars, is because all the options and the breadth of what you could do with a Hollywood picture, right, is being limited. I mean, Netflix, since they're controlling so greatly the material that's on, their platform, that's another huge factor, I think, in the creative side. And I think that there needs to be some standards that go across all films, so they're on the same playing field. If we're going to start allowing, streaming services like this, they need to make sure that they're offering the same creative freedoms, across the entire board. That goes for Hollywood too. I mean, Hollywood has their own, has their own restrictions as well. So I think that there needs to be some kind of place to meet in the middle, In
the middle, yeah. That's a very good point. Now, I'd like us to discuss in the future who are the power players going to be. And right now, it's Netflix. If I was to look into my crystal ball and think, in 10 years, who will be dominating the industry? We have Apple coming into the fray. And although Apple hasn't really revealed any of their definitive plans, we know from how they've dominated the electronics industry that they are not a company to to underestimate. We have
Yeah.
Disney's media dominance has been complete, and them coming into this space, that's another juggernaut that you really have to take very seriously. Warner Media Group is coming in, and they're going to have the backing of AT&T. AT&T has the telecommunications foundation to help reduce costs, keep costs low, and they have the technical expertise with which to help their streaming plans. And Warner has a massive library. A lot of people don't know that Warner's TV library is as impressive or even more than their cinema library. For example, Friends is owned by Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Big Bang Theory
Stranger Things.
by Stranger Things. There are a lot of things that are owned by Warner Brothers, and even Friends is Netflix's #1 watched show.
No, the Office is #1. Friends is second.
Friends is second. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
Stranger Things is the number one original
Netflix
or exclusive.
Original. Yeah.
Exclusive. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So Warner's is coming through in a big way. But if I was to look into the future, I think that Netflix will stay on top. Now, this is the reason why I think Netflix will stay on top. Although they're going to have to give up the rights to a lot of the stuff that's owned by other companies.
Lou, you and I completely disagree on this one.
Okay.
Go
All
ahead.
right. So
Go ahead, and I'll go after you.
Let me validate why. So in business, there's something called the advantage of the first mover. Okay. It means that even amongst products that are of equal value, sometimes the other is of superior value. The person that gets to the market first and penetrates the market and is subscribed to by people have a hard time letting that go. And so they have that advantage. That's, I think, the first thing. And since Netflix was the first to get there, I think worst case scenario, they may slip a bit, but they're always going to be a mainstay in the market. That's one. Two, Netflix is investing heavily in original content. Next year, they're going to spend $15 billion. I mean, it doesn't even sound real. They're going to spend $15 billion in original content. They're starting to add things like sitcoms. They're really diversifying the content.
And a big one that you haven't mentioned yet is that they're creating. I think they're either creating or have almost finished or have finished creating their own studio. So you keep saying original content, but what it really is exclusive content. They have no original content yet, but they will.
Yeah,
soon.
Chris is going to talk more on that. But I think that the main place where I think they're going to win is one, they're going to have the content library. They're not going to slack or slouch on that. And also the advantage of the first mover is a lot more important than a lot of people know in business. It's the thing that has kept, Coca-Cola on top. It's the thing that, that keeps like a lot of companies who are, 1 and 2, basically in those positions. So Breezy, please tell me why I'm wrong and I'm crazy and I'm stupid.
No, you're not. I can't say you're wrong, but I'll say I look at it from a completely different perspective. Because, like you mentioned, Netflix, in the 10 most popular shows on Netflix in 2018, only 2 of them were, let's say, produced by Netflix or whatever. And those are Ozark and Stranger Things. Everything else was licensed from outside, like The Office, Friends, Grey's Anatomy, Supernatural.
Stuff like
yep, exactly. So as time goes by, like we just saw with The Office, everyone is trying to create their own streaming service. So all those original owners are going to be taking back their licensed IP from Netflix. The Office is gone a year from now. The Disney Marvel stuff, they're all leaving.
Star Wars
is going to be gone. And I don't think their current formula is gonna be sustainable for long.
I,
Cause
I
as
agree with Lupe,
cause
and to add to add to Lupe's point, to play devil's advocate, to add to your point, Netflix has also heavily invested in anime, and some of the new original anime content they've been coming out with is some of the best, most innovative content. I think that their new anime content that's coming out, like Seven Seeds, and is a new one that's coming out, and Violet Evergarden is one of my favorite animes of all time. Some of this stuff is more innovative than I think any of their live action movies or TV shows have been in
Mike,
recent
Mike,
years.
Mike, just a
Mike,
question. Is that a personal
for
opinion, or is this something that's a widely held belief amongst the anime, community and people all around the world who like anime content?
No, I'd say it's a growing, because right now,
Okay.
basically, so right now, and we're talking about content, because something we kind of completely skipped over is animation. Like, we skipped over that. Like, we have Crunchyroll, Funimation, we have Verve, right, which
Hmm.
is kind of is a conglomerate of all those things. Also, those things are also owned, of course, by Warner Brothers and subsidiaries of them. I think Crunchyroll has licensed content that's owned by Warner Brothers and one other company. I forgot. Could be like a smaller company. So, you know, as streaming content becomes more of the mainstay, and you want to get that content out to people who want to watch it, and anime has been growing. Like the audience for anime has been growing. I think that inevitably we're going to start seeing. Apple, we're going to see Amazon, because Amazon's been getting into anime too. Netflix has been investing a lot of money into anime. And I've seen some very positive responses from the anime community about that. And if you look at like some of the most watched anime, it's all on Netflix. Like, the same people who watch anime, are also using Netflix. So those numbers, they don't lie. And
Okay.
see,
Okay.
what I was gonna add to that is back to the original question, like who was gonna be the big players in the
Disney.
future.
Let's just stop beating around the bush.
I I,
I don't
I
think so.
believe we're gonna have about three.
Okay, go ahead.
I think things are gonna go back to what they were, meaning
Mm,
you know how you had the big TV networks that controlled everything,
mm-hmm,
and then the streaming era came along and things spread out all over. I
mm-hmm,
think all those big players are going to keep buying all the little ones,
mm,
and we're going to go right back to where we were paying $200 to $300 for one single provider with limited options. I
okay.
So
think that's where it's
I
going.
I completely agree with you
Cause
on
the
that
stream,
perspective, Bob.
Mm-hmm,
yeah, go
Um,
ahead, Chris.
yeah, I completely agree with you, because what we're going to see, what we have seen, is um, is that consolidation of content into one place.
Yep.
So you have Disney shows, you have WB shows, you have all of this stuff all in one place, and they aren't gonna lay down and not fight back.
Yep.
Those companies will fight, um, especially Disney and Warner. And if Disney are buying Fox, they're definitely going to be buying.
No,
Um,
but Disney has bought a lot. For example, like a lot of
and
people don't know,
they
Disney
own.
owns ESPN, they own ABC,
That's what I'm
they
saying.
own Hulu, they own
Sky.
a majority stake in Hulu.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
They are already fighting back because they own parts of Hulu. And I can
Well, they own
pretty
all of
much.
Hulu now because they just finished purchasing the last piece.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to see, in my opinion, Warner targeting these smaller streaming services as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I doubt it will be Amazon, because they've got the safety net of the mega corporation and the stores, which is a good niche for them, which will probably see them benefit.
Also, AI data. They have so much data, like with Amazon Alexa and like the whole integration to smart home and all your products. That's going to be a huge factor in TV that no one else has. Warner Brothers does not have it. Disney does not have it. Now Google has it, but they're not leveraging it very well. Amazon is doing really great content, and they're integrating it with their AI, and AI is going to be a huge component that I think a lot of people are sleeping on.
Definitely. But the key point I was trying to drive at was that for each of these players to survive in the future, they have to carve out a niche which separates them from the competition. So if we look at YouTube, what is their niche? So currently we have content creators,
user-generated content,
and they would be foolish to move away from that. That would be the end of them, in my opinion. You're looking at Hulu,
and they're kind of moving away from that.
Yeah, and they are. You look at Amazon, they have their niche, they have their shop, they have their store, they have all of the corporation behind them. You look at the one that's been bought out, didn't really have anything unique, and it's Hulu, right? So they have already essentially disappeared. If we think Hulu is going to survive, we're fooling ourselves. That will become part of Disney's streaming service.
This is what I think, just to interject. I think that the Hulu name brand will remain, because obviously we know that Disney's a family brand.
Right. Okay.
And so there's some riskier projects that they cannot do. So I think that they might bundle.
Right.
That's exactly.
So that's their niche. So the question that I pose is, what is Netflix's niche going to be to keep them ahead? And
I think it's anime, to be honest.
I disagree.
I disagree. I don't think anime is strong enough.
What I think their niche will be is the news that has come out recently, and it's them buying their dedicated kind of place of operations in Shepperton, which is part of the Pinewood Studios group. They have got like something like 435,000 square feet of studio space, right? That is huge. What we're going to see in the UK now is Netflix using the studio space to create their own content, which will keep the competitors at bay, because Disney makes their own content, Warner makes their own content. Netflix, as you said earlier, they are a very adaptable company. They saw the opportunity with the DVDs and they took it. They saw the opportunity with the streaming and they took it. Now they're seeing the opportunity with the studio space and they're taking it. And that will see them survive and thrive in the future. What that does for other companies and cinema, and especially I'm looking at it from a UK perspective, they've basically taken a huge chunk of UK studio space. Now the UK prides itself on producing its own dramas, and you see a lot of that on BBC America in the States, but you know, we get our content. Our content is in the majority created in the UK that we consume on UK television. So what we might see is kind of a reduction in that ability for smaller companies, indie companies that use like Channel 4 films, which have made films such as Bend It Like Beckham and East is East and Four Lions, which are traditional indie UK films that do very well abroad. They are probably gonna cease to be able, you know, I won't say completely cease to exist, but we're gonna see a large reduction in that, and it's gonna be a lot of Netflix. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, something else could be that Netflix could see an influx of British talent working on, you know, because now they have, you know, where access, you know, the logistics make sense.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's interesting because one thing that we've come to recognize is that Britain has the absolute best, you know, theatrical thespians in the world. So if they are making content for you, you're getting great content. Like if you see Game of Thrones is basically like a British show, to be sincere.
But the reason
if you look
why
at stuff like The Terror is basically British. Chernobyl is, you know. So if these talents are seeing Netflix as an avenue to express their artistry in, it can only be better for Netflix.
But they are as good as they are because they have loads and loads of opportunities to act in these smaller soap operas, small dramas, which the UK is famous for. I hope Netflix will continue to provide that opportunity for the actors to keep that talent level high. But that's to be seen. That's where I think we'll see Netflix maintain its place. Maybe not dominate the likes of Disney and Warner Brothers, but it's definitely going to remain there.
I also think that it's important to mention that we hinted at it, that I think the way Disney is going to be constructed is Disney owns ESPN, owns ABC, Hulu, and obviously Disney. So I think that they're going to bundle their service and that's going to be quite dominant because Disney is going to take care of family content because families always have to have stuff for their kids to watch. It's also going to take care. ESPN is going to take care of sports. Hulu is going to take care of the more mature content that you don't see on like their family stuff. So I think that's going to position them really, 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 really well. And then I feel like whatever streaming platforms are struggling may end up being bought and consumed by the bigger ones.
Which is what Fab was saying.
Which is and if we've noticed anything about Disney, that's their modus operandi. They're happy to do that. So other companies are going to be forced to look at that as an option. And so as Fab said, we may end up with a situation where we have very few providers and the prices are going to go up. And I feel like right now we're in a golden age of streaming where things are cheap. We have access to everything. You have Netflix, you have stuff from basically everywhere. And the honeymoon is going to be over. Does anyone else have anything to add before we go on to closing remarks?
I think we might have hinted on virtual reality a tidbit earlier, but I've seen a lot of journalists, a lot of YouTubers, and just different ones kind of looking at virtual reality as like the next frontier in digital content. And I've seen that from a lot, and honestly I kind of disagree with it, but obviously if it's such a widely held belief, there's got to be something to it. I think that a big thing right now is when it comes to creative material is actually control, because like right now we control everything. We're giving control to the viewer with almost every aspect of entertainment except for the film that you're watching itself. Like once you watch a film, then you have to watch whatever you're watching, right? But with virtual reality, it lets you even experience that in your own terms, like the actual content itself, which, this could be a discussion for a whole different time. So I won't take this to its, ad nauseum or whatever, but basically, it's going to be interesting to see how creators are going to be able to express themselves in such a subjective medium as virtual reality. It's going to be really hard to do that. And maybe it might not be possible at all. And we'll have to see how that affects creativity and art and all that. But that's something that I think that is a subject for maybe another time.
Yeah, I personally think that in the far future, so we're even talking about postmodern, post-future era, VR will be the way. I can't see. I will not. Let me put it this way: I will not be impressed by future technology if VR is not the way we're consuming. Stuff in the future, like
if stuff isn't like Blade Runner,
exactly
2049,
like
future I want to be involved.
That's the future I want to be involved with. But obviously, we're prohibited by the technology, And right now, the technology is just not. It's not where it needs to be for a fully immersive, VR experience. But I feel we'll get there.
I was just gonna add that the way you feel about the VR, it's the way I feel about flying cars. Like I'm still waiting. Like all movies from the past have been showing us the future, and I'm still waiting, man.
I'm still waiting for the hoverboard from Back to the Future.
Oh my god!
It's funny. All you guys are waiting for some sort of like crazy, like technology, but you know what technology fuels all of those things? What? AI, artificial intelligence, and it's here. It's here.
That's gonna be the end of us, Mike.
Oh, we have the AI conspiracy nuts are here.
That's the biggest one. Like, you can't do flying cars unless you have some sort of traffic control system. Guess who controls that? AI. Yeah. And even a lot of the computer technologies that create a lot of the content we watch. Well, some of it's AI.
5G is gonna be big on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and when we're trying to do like actor replacement with CG and all that, how do you think how you're gonna accurately represent what they would say, how they say it? Well, AI.
All right, Max. You can end your AI TED talk right now. Okay. All right. So it's been a really good discussion. We've talked about the sort of like a journey into the entertainment industry, what it was like in the past, what it's been like in the present, and we've had some look into the future of where we think things are going to be in the future. So for closing remarks, I'd like each of us to say something that they're most excited for about in the future and something that they're most fearful for in the future as it pertains to this discussion. So let me start. I am excited for the way that the line between film and television has been blurred. I feel it's going to completely dissipate in the future. And I feel like there's going to be very fierce competition amongst every sort of streaming or entertainment, whether it's video games, whether it's people on YouTube or on Instagram. There's going to be such fierce competition to give high quality content. And I'm very excited to get all of it. What I'm most fearful for is the quality, the visual quality, I think, of the material may go down. And I've noticed that on Netflix, and I hope it's because I feel like when companies become big and they're really, running after profits and they're trying to compete, they're going to try to reduce costs. And I think one of the ways that they may try to reduce costs is by what Netflix is doing right now. So I'm just a little bit concerned about that. Next, Chris, could you tell us something you're excited for?
Well, I'm a pessimist, so I'll tell you what I'm fearful of first.
Okay.
I'm fearful for a lot of things, actually. I'm fearful for the, just a few bullet points, the homogenization of the quality of film, how it's shot. I'm fearful for prices going up, and mostly the social structure of our daily lives, how we consume content, and the kind of disillusion, not the disillusion, the dissolving of like the family content sharing experience.
So communal experience.
The communal experience of watching content. Excited about. I mean, I'm excited by not much.
Wow, you are a pessimist. Oh my goodness.
The flying cars. I'm excited for the flying cars.
Yeah, you and me both, Mike.
Oh my
Chris,
God.
I'm gonna pull something out of my butt for the excited part because it's gonna be tough.
Wow.
All right, go ahead, Mike. Mike, tell us one thing you're excited about and one thing you're fearful for.
I'm excited about video games.
Oh, nice.
Video games are some of the most impactful, emotional, spiritual, and evocative cinematic experiences I've had in the past several years.
Very true.
Um,
Very true.
Games like Horizon Zero Dawn and Detroit Become Human,
Human, God
and
of
the new
War,
God of War, Tomb
even the
Raider.
Halo series.
Yes.
Spider-Man,
Yeah.
Bioshock.
Yeah, Spider-Man is amazing.
Yeah, the
And then
Arkham
The
games.
Last of Us, The Last of Us.
Yeah, yeah.
These games are mature thematically, visually. They use a lot of interesting, and they maintain a high visual cinematography quality, despite being a very subjective experience. At the same time, they guide your eye, they guide the player, and they have those snapshot experiences that you find in cinema a lot. So I'm really excited about about where that's going, and I have pretty much nothing but optimism in that regard.
Just to add one thing to what you're saying, I think that we're going to see Hollywood actors be a lot more involved in video games. Just the past E3, Keanu Reeves is involved with Cyberpunk 2077, and also Death Stranding that's coming out.
Yes. Oh yeah,
has
super
a bunch
excited.
of Hollywood actors.
Ghost of Tsushima, dude. Oof.
Yeah.
We have Hannibal Lecter himself.
Mads Mikkelsen.
Matt Mikkelsen.
Oh,
We
We have the guy from The Walking Dead.
Norman Reedus.
Yes, Norman Reedus.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We have Guillermo del Toro. We have
Rami Malek, and was in Before Dawn.
Yeah.
Or Until Dawn. Rami
Yeah.
Malek, and then also Hayden Panettiere are both in that.
And
Yeah,
for
so
Call of Duty has had a lot of
yeah.
Hollywood actors throughout their run too.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
the future of video games looks good. Tell us something you're fearful for.
Oh boy, the quality going down. I think that there's several reasons for this. The biggest reason I would have to say is because of necessity. Like we said, we're gonna have the homogenization of platforms of content, and of course, when you're trying to make content for everyone to watch on their own, every place at the same time, you have to keep this low bar, this low standard to make sure that everything is going to work on everything. It's going to sell the most people possible, instead of having a dedicated siloed off spot for cinema, and then for TV. The worst aspects of TV are going to leach over into cinema, and the worst aspects of cinema are going to leach over to TV, until we get this content that's going to be sort of in the middle. But I think with capitalism and all that, I think it's gonna be more negative than positive.
Mike, you're a big fan of independent films, like I am.
Yes.
Are you worried about the future of independent films? I certainly am.
Yeah, I think so. I think that now, because basically, like, where do you consume independent films? A lot of times you go to the big blockbuster. To watch a big blockbuster, you go to the theater to watch it, right?
Yeah.
You don't. There's some small theaters to watch independent films, but I feel like it's been very difficult to do that, and I think that they've kind of found a place where they've thrived on
like they currently
TV.
thrive. Yeah, they currently thrive
streaming.
on streaming, and I'm thinking if streaming turns into this kind of competition with the big studios, they might squeeze their independent films out. But so that I just had to squeeze in another negative.
But you see, those are some of the things that the industry is going through right now, because we see that logically the best place for independent films is on streaming platforms. Logically, if you think about it, because people tend to go to theaters for event films.
Yeah.
But then the problem with them being on streaming platforms is that you don't get that cinematic quality.
Yeah.
how quote
The
unquote
cinematic quality is gonna. I'm very pessimistic like V is, and I don't think that bigger TVs and better sound systems are going to retain the cinematic quality from your typical theatrical experience. And the second I didn't get to mention this because you guys kind of interjected, but I think the second point in the decline of quality is that, aside from the necessity and of course the finances of it all, is that the audience no longer desires the cinematic experience in that way. I think it's more about the brevity and the flexibility of the content, being able to consume it in small bits or in large parts at your leisure on any device. And also, the content needs to be immediately. It needs to induce
instant gratification, easily accessible.
Exactly. If you're watching it and you're not gratified instantly, you can just shut it off. Like there's no need to invest. There's no need to, there's no need to build. It's going to be very televisual, I think, because television is like that. You can jump in, you can jump out.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Breezy, could you tell us one thing you're excited about, one thing you're fearful for?
Mine is it's a double-edged sword, to be honest. Because on one hand, I'm excited for the amount of content we're gonna get because of the streaming wars or whatever. Because each company is gonna try to produce the best content possible. But on the other hand, the access to that content is what I'm fearful for. Since all these companies are going to try and buy off each other, so you're going to be limited to the access to you're going to be limited to the amount of different streaming services you're going to be able to have. So sometimes to get access to all that content out there, you're going to have to pay a lot of money.
Yep.
So yeah, on one hand, I'm excited for the amount of content being put out, but on the other hand, the access to that content is what scares me, honestly.
All right. Wow. It's been a very good discussion. I'd like to thank you guys for your valuable contributions.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much. Mike, thank you very much. Breezy, thank you very much.
Thanks for inviting me, man. This has been fun.
No problem. So would you guys like to tell people where they can find you, either on social media or anything you have going on?
Yeah, you may find me. I'm Chris, the Toxic Doctor, on on Vero and on Twitter at Vinaldo7, Vinaldo7.
With the fake PhD.
The only thing he's a doctor in is
player hater's degree for real.
He's a doctor in toxicology. I don't think.
Oh my goodness. Go ahead, Mike.
So you can find me at Millennial Mike. Well, for the time being, it's the Millennial Memer. At Velcro16. That's VELKRO16. That's Velcro spelled wrong with a K.
And where can we find you?
You can find me at Freshie Rose on Twitter.
Rose.
That's FRESHYROSAY.
Nice. And I have been your host. My name is Lupe. You can find me at Live Love Lupe on Twitter. Thanks for listening. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, please encourage us with a very generous review on whatever platform you are listening to this podcast on.
Especially on iTunes.
And if you'd also like to encourage us, be sure to subscribe to our Patreon account, and we will appreciate it kindly. So, thank you very much. See you guys next time on another edition of Film Exiles podcast.
Peace.
Peace.
Bye.